Welcome back, Spooky Souls, to another episode of Let's Talk Spooky, the podcast that digs deep into the eerie, the unexplained, and tonight, the overgrown. I'm your host, Shauna, and we're going to step beyond the garden gate today to a world where blossoms bloom with secrets and roots are tangled in magic, myth, and even a ghost or two. Since we're entering the season of gardening, where we're planting our herbs and watching our flowers bloom, I thought it might be fun to take a step into a lesser-known folklore, a place full of superstition, traditions, and stories that bloom through shadows. So light a candle, grab your sage, and don't stray too far from the path. And let's talk spooky. In the shadowy woods of Petal Forest, nestled in the wild countryside of Lancaster, England, live two rival families of cunning folk, healers, herbalists, and according to local gossip, witches. The most famous among them was Elizabeth Southerns, an elderly woman with a deep knowledge of medicinal plants, passed down through generations of women in her family. Her garden was unlike anything in the village. She grew henbane, foxglove, belladonna, and Mandrake, claiming that each plant held a spirit within it. Locals whispered about her herbs, how they could cure a fever or summon a storm. But Elizabeth's rival was a woman named Anne Whittle, also kept a garden very similar, full of strange herbs. Both women had known to brew teas and tinctures to help the sick and desperate folk of the village. But while the villagers turned to them for help, they also feared the price of crossing them. If your crops failed or your cow went dry, you'd start to wonder, had you refused Annie's request last week? Or perhaps insulted Elizabeth's granddaughter? In 1612, aimed at the paranoia and religious tension, the Petal witches were accused of murder by witchcraft. Testimonies describe charms, herbs, and incantations, like how Elizabeth's granddaughter, Alizone, was said to have cursed a peddler after he refused her herbs. During the trial, prosecutors focused on the herbal knowledge as evidence of devilry. What was once a healing garden had become a witch's apothecary in the eyes of the court. During that trial, 10 people were hung, most of them herbalists, wise women, those known to have read the land or treat the sick with what they grew in their soil. But the story of the Petal Witches reminds us how closely healing and heresy were intertwined in history. A woman who had known to grow foxglove to save a heart might just as easily be accused of stealing one with magic. Even today, wild herbs grow on Petal Hill, where the winds carry whispers of spells and seeds alike. But in folklore, a witch's garden was never just a garden. It was a sacred, often secret space, filled with herbs for healing, hexing, and protection. Plants like rue, mugwort, belladonna weren't just useful, they were powerful. One old tale of Eastern Europe warns of an old woman who grew black poppies that only bloomed during a lunar eclipse. Anyone who picked them fell into a trance, reliving their worst memory over and over again. Whether it was a cottage of a witch in the woods or a wise woman in the village, her garden held a power. It held a secret that only she knew, and that scared people. Which brings us to our next story, one of mists and shrouded hills of 16th century Scotland, where the wind sang secrets through the heather, and every village whispered of a woman named Agnes Sampson. Known far and wide as a skilled midwife and healer, Agnes moved with a quiet purpose and a gentle hand. She was a kind woman who knew which herbs to steep for a fever and which roots to soothe childbirth pains, which flowers to carry the breath of healing, and her garden was a sanctuary, Tucked behind a modest home, it was a living grimoire full of lavender, yarrow, mugwort, mandrakes that all danced in the breeze, plants she'd coaxed from the earth with patience and purpose. But to her neighbors, she was a wise woman. To those in need, she was hope. But to a fearful king and a church seeking devils, Angus' knowledge became a threat. When King James V's infamous witch hunt swept through the Scottish Highlands like wildfire, Angus was among the accused. They said she conjured storms to sink ships, that she whispered the devil's breath to the moonlight, and that her hands that once trusted to deliver life were now bounded and bruised under torture. She confessed, broken, not by guilt, but by pain. Agnes Sampson was executed in 1591. Her garden, once fragrant with healing, became overgrown and silent. Yet some say her spirit still walks among the wild herbs, a whisper in the wind, carried along petals and leaves, that knowledge in the wrong eyes can be turned into a crime, leaving many to believe that when those gardens that are once grown through deep passion for the natural world die, there may be something left to wander through their empty shell, something not of this world. In New England, there's a legend about the Rose Widow, a spirit said to appear at dusk in an abandoned garden where white roses grow wild. She weeps as she walks through the rows, her veil soaked in tears, and it's said if she looks at you, that someone you love will vanish by morning. In Celtic folklore, the weeping willow is believed to mark places where spirits gather, drawn in its dropping branches like mourners at a funeral. Planting one too close to your home was considered an invitation from the other side. In Japan, the Bon Festival sees families plant flowers and light lanterns to guide ancestral spirits home. In parts of Mexico, marigolds are known as the flowers of the dead. Their bright petals line the path and altars during Dia dos Muertos. In rural South America, it was once common to plant a tree at the head of a grave, a living marker of a watchful spirit, whispering between worlds. But no plant carries more eerie lore than a mandrake. If you're a Harry Potter fan, you may be familiar with the mandrakes. The legend is much darker than anything J.K. Rowling brought to life. In medieval legend, it grows where hanged men's final breath falls. The roots resemble a human figure. When pulled from the ground, it screams, killing anyone who hears it. To harvest one safely, they said you had to tie it to a dog, plug your ears, and run. The poor dog would be dead. But you'd get your mandrake root. But beware, mandrakes weren't just rare, they were incredibly dangerous, believed to grant both power and madness to those who harvested them. In 17th century Germany, a time when over 900 people were executed in accusations of witchcraft, there lies a lesser-known account of the mandrake. In a small town of Würzburg, Elsa Conrad was a widow of an apothecary, which she had taken over after her late husband's passing. Known for her sharp mind and a garden that yielded rare and potent plants, she drew both admiration and suspicion from the locals. One summer evening in 1629, a soldier, injured in the ongoing 30 Years' War, arrived at her door seeking relief from his unbearable pain. Elsa prepared a tincture for him with poppy and valerian root. But the soldier, delirious, muttered about seeing a devil's root on her workbench, and there the rumors were born. In the weeks that followed, townsfolk whispered that she had been seen in the graveyard under the crescent moon, digging near the gallows with a dark dog at tow. Elsa had in fact found what she believed to be a mandrake. Its root gnarled and twisted like the tiny human form, stained with the scent of earth and grave rot. According to writings later found in her ledger, she followed an old recipe, tied the root to the dog, and fled, hoping the beast would free the root without triggering a scream. And the next morning, the dog was found dead, and the townspeople took this as a sign of devilry. Elsa was arrested and tortured, and under her distress, she confessed to conjuring spirits and making talking plants. She was burned at the stake on a bitter October morning, and her garden was razed and burned. What makes this account stand out is a strange footnote in the archives of Prince Bishop's records. A monk, Jonas Albrecht, described finding Elsa's notes after her execution. Among them was a dried root, shaped eerily like a human body, small arms outstretched, legs twisted, and a split in the root where the mouth might have been. The mandrake was locked away in the monastery vault, where it remained until it mysteriously vanished during the Napoleonic sack of Würzburg in 1803. Some say it was stolen by a French officer who later went mad, claiming he could hear voices and whisperings from his satchel. To this day, no one knows where that mandrake went. From ancient garden magic to madness-invoking plants, there's no shortage of legends roaming through the garden history. But I have one final story for you that might make you think twice about venturing into untamed gardens. In the quiet suburb outside of Portland, Oregon, there was a crooked lane that doesn't appear on a GPS map. Locals call it Widdershins Lane, a name passed down from older folk in the neighborhood. Though no one remembers who named it or when, at the end of the road sits an overgrown property with a rustic gate, tangled hedges, and a house half swallowed by ivy. People call it the Witch's Garden. The story goes that in the 1770s, a woman named Maurice Thorne moved into the house. She wore black all year round, she kept strange hours, and was often seen digging in her garden under the light of the moon. No one knew where she had come from, but her garden was legendary. Lush wildflowers, plants that didn't belong in this climate, black hawthorns in July, mandrakes in the shade of the fence, rose bushes that bloomed only in the dead of winter. Neighbors whispered that she grew herbs for curses, that she kept journals of moon cycles and names of people who had wronged her. Over the years, bad luck seemed to follow anyone who trespassed over her yard. Car accidents, miscarriages, unexplained illnesses. Some claimed that they heard humming coming from the garden when nothing else was around. Others stated that they would see shadows moving through the hedges after dark. One teenager dared to steal a sprig of nightshade for a Halloween dare. 3 days later, he was found unconscious in his room with a fever so high it could melt the wax off a candle. He had survived, but he swore that he could see her face in his dreams, whispering plant names that he couldn't forget. But it was one day in late 1990s where Maria vanished. The house was locked, the garden was left to rot, but no plants ever died. The rose bush still bloomed every January, the nightshade thrived in the frost, and the new homeowners never stayed very long. Some reported strange dreams, being buried alive in the dirt, the smell of ash and lavender. One woman even claimed the vines tried to pull her back when she stepped too close to the garden center. People say Maria didn't die, she just went underground, that her body now feeds the garden, and her spirit moves through the roots. It's said that if you walk woodshine counterclockwise 3 times during a full moon, you'll hear her whisper her secrets and spells. But be warned, the price for listening is that sometimes something of you stays behind. Maybe it's your breath, maybe it's your shadow, or maybe it's your name in the wind. No one really walks the path more than twice, just in case. And that's where I will leave you for tonight, my friends. From screaming roots of the Mandrake to skeptical rose bushes of Widdershins Lane, tonight's journey through the twisted veins of garden folklore reminds us that the earth holds memories. So tonight, take a moment. Stand still in your own garden. Listen to if it hums a little louder at night than you'd like to admit. Maybe that old herb book passed down through your family knows a little more than it's letting on. Or maybe the next time you see a flower blooming out of season, you'll wonder who or what might be helping it grow. If you like this episode, don't forget to leave a review, share, and follow Let's Talk Spooky wherever you listen to your podcast. It helps our little spooky family grow. Have your own eerie garden tale or family superstition passed down through the soil? I'd love to hear it. You can reach out to us on our social media pages or email me your story. It might even make it to a future episode. So until next time, keep your herbs labeled, your moon phases tracked, and remember, not everything that's grown is meant to be picked. You've been listening to Let's Talk Spooky. I'm Shauna, and I'll see you in the garden. This episode was written and produced by me, Shauna. Links to the research can be found in the show notes. Have a spooky story? Email us at letstalkspookypodcast@gmail.com or follow us over at our Instagram page at Let's Talk Spooky Podcast. Thanks for listening and have a spooky day.